Financial news in English, 财经新闻学英文 Unit 23, Dealing with the Aftermath 处理善后 Unit 23, Dealing with the Aftermath. All of the crises mentioned in this book have different titles, but they share some common features. In a frenzy environment, investors were seeking venues for higher returns. As a result, certain financial instruments were invented to satisfy the insatiate demand for profits. Since no one knows for sure how those new inventions will work, the initial success turned a fluke into euphoria and then an invincible mindset. When the frenzy went through the roof and became unsustainable, the burst of the bubble was only a matter of time. In most cases, corruptions or scandals were involved, similar to what had happened in the South Sea bubble, the Mississippi bubble, the S&L crisis in the 1980s, and many others. When the subprime bubble burst, the housing market collapsed. Many of the houses were now below their mortgage value or underwater. If the creditors and the debtors could cooperate, the banks might keep the cash flow and the consumers have a place to call home. However, as the situation worsened, the borrowers lost their jobs and had to stop their payment to the bank, while the creditors were eager to get their money back. The whole scenario is the epitome of moral hazard and adverse selection. If repossession occurs, the banks stand to lose up to 20% of the value of the house due to the tedious process incurred. However, the moral hazard issue deterred the banks from being lenient. Though cooperation is the best for the banks and the homeowners, if the creditors agree to soften the burden of those in trouble, everyone would ask to enjoy the same privilege. Thus, few creditors would let the borrowers off the hook, even though that will be the best for all of them. On the other hand, the homeowners had better pay what is owed, then they would have a house to live in, and it would be easier to get back to their normal lives. Still, when the value of a house dropped more than 50%, it did not make sense for them to pay their mortgage. Foregoing their obligation amounted to several years of earning, a temptation few could resist. Under such circumstances, the episode was a disaster waiting to explode out of proportion. A cooperative solution could be found, but it was hard to reach. Eventually, the crisis in the U.S. spread to most of the world. However, unlike the Great Depression era, the U.S. had collaborated with other countries to coordinate their efforts to calm down the market sentiment. Quantitative easing had thus become a household term. At the depths of the Great Recession, the unemployment rate of the U.S. was higher than 10%, and the concomitant downturn had triggered numerous sovereign debt crises. The term PIGS, P-I-G-S, signifies four countries: Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain, suffering from the severity of the situation. In addition, major banks have suffered from their own meddling. The stock price of Citibank had dropped below $1 for many days. To save itself from being delisted from the stock market, a reverse stock split was implemented. The misery of the whole world cannot be overemphasized. The crisis was not caused by the breakdown of the economics discipline, but a series of the failures of the billion monitoring schemes of the financial system. The banks had to supervise their officers in making loans. The same applied to the credit rating agencies in exercising due diligence to examine the quality of the products to be sold to the investors, who in turn must read the prospectus carefully before purchasing any financial assets. Nevertheless, all those checks broke down by a conflict of interest between the credit rating agencies and investment bankers, coupled with a deadly invention, CDS, which once was over $60 trillion in 2007, more than the GDP of the whole world combined. After all the checks had been broken, the economy melted as a result. Is the world safer now than before? Unfortunately, no one can say for sure. As long as the modus operandi of the financial institutions and the greatness of human nature remain unchanged, the whole world may never be immune from another episode of frenzy, whatever the cause may be. vocabulary, collaborate, collaborate, cooperative, cooperative, coordinate, coordinate, corruption, corruption, released, released, epitome, epitome, eventually, eventually, fluke, fluke, household term, insatiate, insatiate, lenient, lenient, medal, medal, mindset, mindset, modus operandi, modus operandi, off the hook, overemphasize, overemphasize, pigs, 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 privilege, privilege, repossession, repossession, reverse stock split, reverse stock split, tedious, tedious, temptation, temptation, underwater, underwater, unsustainable, unsustainable. End of Unit 23.